Welcome back to the YouTube home for BamaOnline.com. It is a Monday, February the 26th. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BOL, alongside team expert Jimmy Stein. And then, of course, right there below us, site publisher Tim Watts. And guys, no shortage of topics on this Monday morning. We'll get into some advanced scouting of spring practice coming up here before you know it at the University of Alabama. We'll talk about some veterans, some returning veterans for this Alabama football team set to make an impact in year one under Kalen DeBoer. We'll talk some Alabama men's hoops. The sun did rise on Coleman Coliseum Sunday morning. Jimmy can attest to that. We can get a firsthand account of that from Jimmy Stein. We'll talk about what's next for Nate Oates' team following a 117-95 blowout loss at the hands of the Kentucky Wildcats. We'll get into your comments here too, because we are live right here on YouTube. And we'll check in with Andrew Bone, does an outstanding job as our senior recruiting editor for BamaOnline.com. We'll talk some recruiting with both Andrew and Tim coming up just a little bit later. But guys, I guess we'll start with hoops and the after effects, perhaps, for this team. Although, Jimmy and Tim, what we've seen after losses like this kind of loss, go back to the Tennessee loss on the road earlier in the season, bounce back at home. A little bit different this time around, though, because you stay on the road with a game against an Ole Miss team that, let's be honest, not going to attract a lot of attention right now, struggling a little bit in year one under Chris Beard. What's most important for this team right now, Tim?
I think you just learn from being humbled, right? I mean, we discussed this last week. What do we say? You're running, which Kentucky you're running into? The one that's 6 weeks away from being full of millionaires and almost like, hey, the regular season's tough for us to finish. Let's focus on the NCAA and SEC tournament, or a pissed off Kentucky team. I mean, talent's never been the issue. I mean, they've got 2 or 3 guys that'll be mentioned in the lottery. They've got 2 or 3 more guys that'll be mentioned in the first round. Great class, unbelievable talent. So we knew how talented they were. And you come out and catch that buzzsaw, don't defend well. They're on fire. So you've got, regardless of who you play, if they're on fire and you're not defending well, you're in big, big trouble. And again, putting it at Rupp, I think they'd lost 3 of their last 4 and had absolutely been embarrassed at LSU with that loss. Absolutely cakewalked through that game. I think they scored 49 points. So obviously we now know you got the pissed off Kentucky team that's super talented. And, with basketball, I think there's a thought process that you never want to get too high. You want to get humbled from time to time. And I think that happened to Alabama. And, again, we knew this was a possibility because we knew you really wanted to hold serve at home against Florida, which they did. If they had not won that game in overtime, this would be much more somber this morning.
So, Jimmy, if I'm a Kentucky fan, I might be a little bit frustrated on this Monday morning because I'm thinking, this is the talented team that we were thinking could be a Final Four team at some point down the road. Who knows? Maybe this is the better approach for Cal. This is going to be probably, unless Kentucky really turns it on from here, which could happen. This is a Kentucky team that going in the NCAA tournament is going to have a bit of an underachiever tag. And, maybe that's the formula for Kentucky. But you still sense the frustration from Nate too, right? With the defensive effort. I'm not saying he's at the point of throwing his hands up in the air and saying this is who we are defensively, like some of us have said since really December. But it's still obviously very much stuck in his craw following last Saturday.
Yeah, you kind of are what you are at this point, right? I mean, I don't think all of a sudden Alabama's going to wake up in Oxford Wednesday and find that they're all of a sudden one of the better defensive teams in the league. I mean, you are what you are at this point in the season. I think really a lot of it is just personnel. You rebuild your roster every year. You got a new team every year. And if you look at the regulars, the guys who play a lot of minutes, I mean, who's described by experts as a plus defender, who's really good on defense? Maybe Rylan Griffin, he's got some great length, on the perimeter. But what other Alabama player is as a plus defender? Grant Nelson often has a mismatch issue when he's with a bigger bodied guy he's trying to guard down low. I don't think anyone's going to call Nick Pringle a great defender. Even Mark Sears has gotten publicly scolded by Nate Oates for his defense at times. Estrada, again, not a superb defender. I think it's just kind of the cards you draw from year to year these days. I mean, you're not going to go out and just prioritize, hey, I'm going to go out and recruit shutdown defenders that average 9 points a game. I mean, you're going to recruit scorers and then hope that their athleticism is something you can work with in terms of making them plus defenders. Nate has had some outstanding defenses in the past. I think this is just sort of a team that was just never going to be great defensively. And what great coaches do, guys, is they coach around that. They play around it. Alabama has to play around what they have. Everyone has deficiencies. Even UConn, who I think may win the national title, they lost, pretty badly to Creighton. Everyone has flaws now. There are no dynasties out there.
You know what makes playing defense even tougher, Tim, when you're turning it over, live ball situations.
Yeah.
Alabama outscored 29-10 by the Cats on Saturday. Team that already struggles to guard. And you get a team that's talented and like you, it wants to push it. I asked the question a week or so ago. Do Florida and Kentucky really think they want to get into a game in the 90s, maybe the hundreds with this Alabama team? Well, Kentucky answered that question. Yeah, we're good with that, especially when you got people shooting it as well as the Cats did. But you can't mix in turnovers, live ball turnovers, when you're already struggling on the defensive end, because that's going to complicate matters quite a bit.
Yeah. You look at everything with that team, and coming out again, Kentucky hits on their strides. You're already behind the 8 ball and you're on the road. So you already have it against you. But, I do feel like Wrightsville not playing was a big miss. I think Sam was a little bit less comfortable on the road than he was at home. Still going to be a terrific player. But I'll tell you this, I watched this team. First of all, I think in the middle of the year, most of us realized this is not, from a talent standpoint, it's not even close to the most talented team in the SEC, right? A lot of these guys, it almost had a really good mid-major feel to it this year. Not as many stars, especially coming off the heels of what we saw last year, right? We had superstars on that team. You had really good players. You had all that stuff going for you. So I think when you look at this team now, they kind of are what you are. I enjoy them. I would much rather this team be able to score and have to outscore an opponent than for us to be playing 50-49 and trying to hold on for dear life and milk it out. I enjoy this team. Even the run at the end of the game, I had fun watching them. They can shoot, but you're not going to go to mid-major type programs in the portal and find guys shooting 43% from three and slapping the floor, like Gary the Glove Payton. Those guys, most of the guys that shoot threes, like, would you call Steph Curry a great defender? No, he spends all his time shooting. He ain't doing the old defensive shuffle up and down the floor like he used to have to. So, but obviously this is a team, like Jimmy said, that has work to do. And you said not a perfect team, but I've really enjoyed them. I actually consider them overachievers at this point in the season.
Yeah. We've never made the statement that we thought this was a championship team. I haven't anyway throughout the course of the season. What we have said time and time again, fun as hell to watch. And that continues to be the case. And I'm with you, Tim. If I'm going to watch a basketball team or any team really throughout the course of the season to keep me captivated, I'm as guilty as the next person. And I take pride in being a big charge take fan and grit and slapping the floor and all that stuff. But hell, who doesn't love watching the ball go through the net on a consistent basis? So, Jimmy, when you think about what's coming up in these next two games, Ole Miss on the road, Tennessee back in Tuscaloosa, should be incredible atmosphere for Saturday. College Game Day coming to town for the first time for basketball with ESPN. But when I ask you about difficulty of these next two games, is it Tennessee at home before you talk about Ole Miss on the road? Because South Carolina went into Oxford over the weekend and kind of just took down the homestanding Rebels pretty easily. Ole Miss struggles to score on a consistent basis. Coming off a loss like Kentucky, you worried about the psyche of this team, or is being tied for the top of the SEC standings, you think, enough, knowing Tennessee's down the road? But that in and of itself could present some dangers with the trip to Oxford on Wednesday night. How do you look at these next two in terms of readiness for this Alabama team?
I think they're catching Ole Miss at a good time. I mean, this is a little bit of good schedule luck here. I think, playing Ole Miss on the road this week feels a little different than had you played them on the road in January, I think, when they were probably playing their best basketball of the year. I think the Tennessee game is even going to be a little tougher for Alabama because of the matchup. I think that's a difficult matchup for Alabama. Ole Miss is a better matchup. Alabama doesn't have to score 100 to beat Ole Miss, but scoring in the 80s might do it. And you would think Alabama could do that on cruise control. And Alabama should be more the pissed off Alabama, just like we saw pissed off Kentucky on Saturday. This should be an Alabama team wanting to prove itself all over again. And while I agree totally with you guys about how we have never all season described this team as a championship basketball team, I think you're a 2-0 week away from we need to start describing them that, but that they have to go 2-0 this week. I don't think 1-1 is going to win the SEC, but 2-0 this week, they might be a championship team. This is their prove it or don't week in terms of that SEC crown. Both games tough. I worry about the Tennessee matchup. I worry that Ole Miss is on the road, but I think the Tennessee game is tougher to me. As you guys know, I always talk about dudes. Tennessee's got dudes that I'm going to worry about. I think Ole Miss is difficult because they're extremely well coached, and it's on the road.
One
Tim,
thing to consider, though, is I do not think we're going to see the Flanagan kid. Have y'all seen the MMA elbow to the chin? I mean, perfectly timed, lined up, bop. I mean, he's going to be suspended for sure.
And YG got a game. You got to think he's getting a game, right?
Oh, I think he might. I mean, I don't
get more.
I'm not going to guess. I mean, this is what Wagyu did was in slow motion, or I'm not sure we even noticed it, right? This was the whole world live, was all over my Twitter feed at one point. I thought he did it 8 times.
I don't think Wagi's was even called a foul.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It happened. It was sort of in the scrum. It fell down. It was the old boom on, type of deal.
You got him. Yeah.
But we had to go in slow motion to really get a good view of this. This was full court. You could have been in fast motion when we saw this thing. So I think that this is going to be I hate to guess what the NCAA or SEC will do, but I think it's a heavy suspension. I mean, also Ole Miss has lost 5 of their last 6 games. Had such a early start. I agree with Jimmy that we are catching them at the right time because they're a little bit more. That'll be deflating. That's going to be the subject all week. So, of course, I think Tennessee's the toughest game. And Tennessee has Auburn this week, right?
Same Wednesday night early, you get Tennessee hosting Auburn, and then the nightcap of those 4 games, you're going to have Alabama at Ole Miss. So we're going to learn a lot. And even South Carolina playing Wednesday night, hanging in there. I had South Carolina as a fader after a couple of those losses here recently. Yeah. But kudos to those guys. I mean, we've talked about Ole Miss struggling, but still, that's the kind of game, if you are circling the drain, you go to Oxford and lose last Saturday. And instead, the Gamecocks kept themselves relative to the SEC championship discussion. Either way, these 4 final games for Alabama, you got to beat Tennessee. I think, you could maybe go 2-2 and get a share. But one of those has to be Tennessee, and you might need to go 3-1. Probably do need to go 3-1. And one of those still will need to be Tennessee.
The thing about Tennessee that's rather amazing in a bad way for them is they go Auburn, Bama, South Carolina, and Kentucky.
Yeah.
That's their closeout. They've got Alabama and South Carolina on the road, which is probably the worst case scenario for them because at home they probably would have been a pretty big favorite. But again, I mean, I looked at Alabama's schedule. I said, this is going to be hard. And then I looked at Tennessee's and was like, wow, if they win this division, if they win this conference, Tennessee's 1,000% earned it because they did it the hardest way possible these last 4 games. But I agree, you lose. That Tennessee game's huge because it's head-to-head. It's head-to-head. That's a 1-game swap right there.
Guys, let's get into some football discussion as we get ready for the start of 2024 spring drills. The first time under Kalen DeBoer as head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide. That's just going to take a little bit of getting used to, isn't it? And from what I understand, at least, even the practice format, the routine, the availability of players and coaches, coordinators, where the media is concerned, it's going to be a little bit of a shock to the system, but we look forward to it as well. Something we also tend to do any spring, it seems like, is we get really excited about either early enrollees and or guys that we didn't see much of the previous season. See how much improvement maybe they've made after their first seasons on campus. And as a result, we forget about some veterans. We look at some positions, guys like, well, outside linebacker, because you had that monster signing class in 2023 in terms of edge defenders. We look at even offensive tackle because we saw a guy a year ago have a great shot to jump in there and win a job, and it didn't necessarily work out. He's still around. And then, some other places as well, maybe even running back a little bit. And I talk about Jam Miller, I guess, guys, Tim, as a veteran, he's only going into his third year in the program. But in today's college football, if you keep a guy going into his third year, you better damn well believe, in my book anyway, Tim, he's a vet.
Yeah. Yeah. And he seems like he's been around forever, right? We always get little glimpses of Miller. I loved him this past year catching balls out of the backfield, right? I mean, he's a moving tank when you hit him in stride. I do think that he's a guy that has a chance. I mean, again, we always want to focus on our shiny toys. You're right. We want to focus. But then again, Justice had a whole year in the system. Richard had a whole year in the system. We got two pretty good freshmen coming in this group. So, yeah, I think Jam's going to get the early load. But, I mean, obviously it's going to be hard to keep other guys off the field. But I think he could sort of take over. He reminds me of Jace in a lot of ways, except I think he's faster and he's been more durable up to this point.
Jimmy, it's interesting because size-wise, you look at Jam Miller and Justice Haynes, very similar, but I think Tim just hit on it. Stylistically, even in that national championship semifinal Rose Bowl game against Michigan, it was on display. Alabama needed it on a 3rd and 4 there in the fourth quarter, gets the ball to Jam on the perimeter. He makes good on it. But throughout that game, I thought we saw sort of a savviness and a maturity beyond his years as far as working between the tackles, patience, instincts, anticipation. And as Tim said, maybe not quite the burst of Jam Miller, but Justice Haynes, it's a nice mix, really. Once you get past the measurables, these are two guys that can help the offense in some ways the same, but in other ways, they've got their own stamp on the position.
Yeah, they're more similar than different. They're similar backs to me, Jam and Justice, similar, even in talent level, to me, similar. But if I was going to say the biggest difference, and it's really more minute, but the biggest difference to me is when you hand them the ball or pitch them the ball and there's a defender between them and the goal line, it seems to me that Jam's the kind of guy that cuts inside because he'll run through traffic. He ain't afraid to do that. He'll put his head down, run inside, whereas Justice is almost always going to bounce that outside and use his incredible quickness and shiftiness. So Justice a little bit more shifty, a little bit more bouncy. I think Jam a little tougher inside, but really they're more carbon copies than different. But it's nice to have both. You can never have enough. I think, look, Jace and Roydell were good players. They're good. Jace is going to be selected in the NFL draft. He'll be on your TV screen this week at the NFL Combine, and I think Roydell will have a good year at Florida State. They're good players. I think Jam and Justice can be great players. Now, they need a lot of help. Running backs need blocking. They need the threat of a pass game. They need a lot of things to go right around them. But Alabama lost their top two backs, and in my mind has improved because I see more talent in Justice and Jam. And I think this offense is going to treat them well. I'm really excited about what I've been calling the Jam and Justice show.
Tim, what about Elijah Pritchett? Too soon to just assume he's been placed on the scrap heap and moving on to one of these younger players, maybe reevaluating some guys who have played more on the inside in the last year or two and perhaps giving them a shot at tackle? Or do you think there's still a window? You don't get many second windows at a place like Alabama to win a job. But it looks like that's what's in front of Elijah right now.
Yeah, I think, this is a whole different offensive line philosophy. So where you had guys like Wilcom Formby, who was considered too light to play for Alabama, right? Well, now this is a totally different offensive line mindset. So he might be exactly where they want to go. I've said this all year. Just because we don't know who it is, don't mean he's not on campus, right? I mean, Proctor was a really good offensive tackle. And J.C. Latham was. Proctor was a really promising freshman. So they had their guys locking up the edges there. Other guys didn't get a whole lot of chance to play. But yeah, with Pritchett, they liked him enough that he was a starting left tackle in spring practice. I understand it went bad. I understand it didn't go well and all that stuff. But he earned enough. They saw enough in practice that he did enough to get to that starting position. Now, didn't translate on the field. He's got another year, new coaches to be in his ear. Also, remember, he hit the portal and they pulled him back out. They went and talked to him. That was an easy chance. When you want somebody to go, you just say, hey, best of luck to you. They obviously saw something Saban staff. I find it hard to believe the new staff looks at him and goes, nah, this guy can't play, right? I mean, you've seen Elijah Pritchard in a uniform. You're absolutely saying, holy crap, this guy can play. So, I think he's one of the guys we're going to see the most of in the spring. One of those guys that's going to get, like you said, a second audition, even though it'll be a first impression, but it's going to be a second audition. So I still think he's got a chance to get in there. I mean, loved him out of high school. He's a big kid. He's highly recruited. And I do know this, when his name kind of went in the portal, it didn't actually go in the portal. It was announced he was expected to go in the portal. There was a ton of interest in Pritchett. So it's not like it's only Alabama that wanted to keep him on campus.
Yeah, Pritchett, I could have imagined at Florida State with about half of the rest of the guys
Yes,
off Alabama's roster that headed to
absolutely.
Tallahassee.
They were
So
definitely a school interested.
yeah,
Yeah.
that would have made some sense there had he actually taken that route. Now, we've even talked about this, Jimmy, at wide receiver, because maybe in relation to Kendrick Law, who again, as a third-year player, I'm going ahead and calling him a vet. And I'm going to do the same with another guy at that position. What about Kobe Prentice? This is
Yes.
a guy that with Isaiah Bond, especially last season, taking that next step, it seemed like it came at least somewhat at the expense of Kobe Prentice. Is there a path for Kobe to become a more significant contributor? Because you bring in Jeremy Bernard, you're expecting Jalen Hale to take a step up. Ryan Williams, we all know what's coming down the pike with that talented wide receiver, a talented wide receiver class in general that Alabama was able to sign. But what are you thinking for maybe Kobe Prentice and even Emmanuel Henderson, some of these other guys?
Yeah, Kobe's the go-to guy for me. Anytime I'm asked, okay, who on this offense do you see taking a huge step forward due to the coaching change, due to the scheme change? What veteran is going to look like a new kid? To me, it's Kobe, who's been a good player. I think some Alabama fans might be shocked at his overall production over 2 years. He's caught more balls than any other Alabama receiver on the roster. I think Jeremy Bernard has a few more balls. Of course, he was at Michigan State and Washington. But I think this new scheme's good for Kobe. More of a spread, more of a put more receivers in routes. Kobe's got experience now. He's a veteran, I think, by any definition. And this is the right offense for him. He's also going to have an improved quarterback. I know this isn't going to be the quarterback show, and we got time to do 30 of those before next fall. But I think Alabama's going to have improved quarterback play one way or the other. And Milroe is likely, in particular, I think, to really improve as a passer under this staff and in this scheme. And I think that means a lot more balls for a guy like Kobe Prentice. I'm excited about Kobe. I think he can be one of the more productive wide receivers, not just at Alabama, but in this league in terms of being a volume receiver. I don't know how many huge plays. I don't know how many 70-yard touchdown passes you're going to get, but I can see Kobe with a lot of receptions in this new offense. And he's dependable. That's the best way to describe him.
We got a comment from a viewer here before we get into that with Tim Watts. We want to remind you, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, we certainly hope you would take the time to do that right now. Hit that subscription button, please. Hit the like button while you're at it. Turn on those notifications. You'll get all of our video content from BamaOnline.com as it drops right here on the YouTube home for BOL. So Stephen Burton here viewing, and we appreciate you doing that, Stephen. He chimes in. Tim, he says Ryan Williams missing spring has to hurt him, and he is already so young. Is it a real possibility of Ryan Williams playing, seeing the field in 2024? I think I know your answer to this, and that's why I'm going to also ask you the sense of urgency for a guy like Kobe Prentice and some of these other wide receivers this spring to make an impact, to make your mark, because I think I know what you're going to say about Ryan Williams.
Yeah, I just don't think you can keep Ryan off the field. I mean, I get the spring certainly hurts, but we've seen guys, Malachi Moore, for instance. We've seen, this wasn't everybody didn't always enroll early. We used to celebrate the 5 or 6, like, hey, they've got 5 December enrollees, January enrollees. Then it turned to like 11, 17. Where were we up to 18? Now we're like looking sideways at the guys that didn't make it. Sometimes we're wondering what's wrong with you, but Ryan's just so talented. I get it. He's got legitimate points. Ryan's a smaller guy. He's going to turn 17 years old in February. He's going to play the season at 17. But he's got so much talent. I mean, he's so fast. He's a route runner. He's built different. Mentally, he's strong. He loves this. I have no doubt that Ryan enters Tuscaloosa this summer knowing the playbook inside and out. I have no doubt that he is on the phone with Shep a good bit. If I'm Shep, I'm calling him a good bit and working him in because you've got plans for him, right? So I think from that standpoint, I think Kobe has to worry about Ryan. I think Ryan's a different animal than Kobe. You know what I mean? They're the same position technically by wide receiver, but they're going to do 2 different things. I believe Kobe, like Jimmy said, is going to be more of that guy across the middle. And Kobe's had a great story. And, last year you kind of felt like Jalen Milroe had 2 guys when there was pressure, right? It was Burton, just throw it deep, or he threw it deep to Bonds. But Kobe had more yards per catch, even though a lot less catches than Isaiah did. So I do think he can be durable, like Jimmy said, across the middle, a guy that's going to do that stuff. And they got Jeremy, and they're going to have Ryan. And I still think Jalen Hill's a guy to really watch because he's too talented. He's too talented for a coaching staff not to get unbelievably excited about him.
Yeah, I think Bernard's the guy that it could impact Kobe the most because I see them positionally being maybe a little more similar, maybe Kendrick Law too, in that sort of mix. And then you got true outside guys. To me, Jalen Hale is a true outside guy. Ryan Williams is going to be an outside guy. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. But first, we got to get through spring drills. Before we let you go here, Jimmy Stein, and we welcome Andrew Bowen onto the program, I'm going to give you one more guy on the offensive side that I consider a vet at this point, and that's Ty Simpson going into his 3rd year in the program.
Sure.
Are you sleeping, Tim Watts, on Ty Simpson and the possibility of him being a bigger impact guy than maybe a backup in 2024?
No, I think he'll be competitive. I mean, again, you get a whole new coaching staff. You get everyone that's wide open, so you can look at everything these are a fresh set of eyes, right? There's no person. They don't know what Ty Simpson's looked like the last 2 years in practice. They don't know what Dylan's looked like the last 2 years in practice. Same for Jalen, although Jalen's got that advantage because they do know exactly what they're getting, haven't seen him on film so much. But no, I think Simpson's a guy. I mean, he's a guy we feel he can pass the ball well. He's a very underrated athlete. You know what I mean? So a lot of things there you have to like. I mean, obviously, I think Jalen's going in as quarterback 1, but I do think you get a whole new coaching staff. I think that could be opened up a little bit more.
Was it a good thing, Jimmy Stein? Is it a positive? Is Ty Simpson a beneficiary of change with this coaching change, you think? And where do you have him at on your radar in terms of legitimacy and being able to compete perhaps as early as this spring?
I think he is a beneficiary of the change in the sense that everyone's starting from square one. And I think with Ty's history, I mean, in terms of growing up in a coach's home, I think if everyone has to learn a new offense quickly, maybe Ty's your guy. I mean, in the sense that Ty's been around it so much, I don't think any terminology, any new routes, any new this new offense is going to be something that Ty's probably going to pick up on as quickly as anyone, just with his history of growing up with a dad who was a college quarterback and a college coach. So in that sense, I do think Ty's a beneficiary. I also think, as I talked about yesterday on the roundtable, Ty was a different quarterback at the end of last year. If you look at his numbers over his last 2 appearances versus numbers in the first 6 or 7 appearances, much improved. I think the light sort of came on for him. And while I agree with Tim totally that Jalen Milroe's the deserved QB1, and I think Jalen Milroe takes the first snaps, whether you're talking about in practice or frankly in the games this fall. One big difference. Last year when Jalen was sat because it wasn't going so well, Ty Simpson wasn't ready to take the job from him. My advice to Jalen is don't get sat again, because I think this year Ty's not going to give up the job that easily if he gets a chance. I think it's a Ty that's just more ready, and he is in year 3, which makes him a veteran in today's game.
There you go. There are some offensive vets that you best not sleep on for the 2024 season as we get ready for the start of spring drills at the Capstone. We're going to go quad box. How about that? There's Andrew Bone. Good morning, Andrew.
Morning, guys. Guess y'all started out.
Once again, Tim, he rubs the On3 merch right in our faces that the rest of us have yet to receive. But, you know.
I'm waiting on that hat.
I think he stole that from Joseph. I don't think we gave it to Andrew. I think he stole it from Joseph. You know what's crazy?
We got that hat giveaway coming up.
Yeah, we got to start hyping that. They'll be excited. I got a few guys
that hat.
I really wish we could put them in a cage and let them fight for it. I got a few friends on that board they'll cut some Achilles to get a hold of it.
Oh,
it's amazing. It really is amazing the number of people who've reached out to me that have asked, "Hey,
it's annoying." Yeah, it's annoying. It's like I got them in my pocket. Hey, send me a hat.
That's why I keep getting new ones, because I know it drives Tim just absolutely crazy.
I tell my friends who ask, I wouldn't get them for my kids. They're $100. All right, so I'm damn sure not getting them for you.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Tim Watts. Hey, Jimmy, man, thanks for jumping in this morning. Always appreciate your input. Good stuff as always. Be sure to check out Jimmy with us right there on the roundtable at BamaOnline.com. Jimmy, look forward to doing it again real soon.
Looking forward to it, guys.
There you go.
See you.
Alabama team expert, Jimmy Stein. There we go. We got the triple box now.
I was hoping we were kicking Tim out.
Well, I these buttons, you got me hitting these buttons. You never know what you're going to get over here. You never know. Hey, but Andrew, we're talking some vets first. We're going to get into some recruiting, obviously, with you and Tim coming up here in just a little bit. But wanted to hit on the defensive side, too. We went over the offensive side with Jimmy, but defensively, some veterans on this team. And we actually John Hash here in the comments, a viewer. We appreciate the input. John, do you guys think Q-Rob can be a third down player? He will have a role, in my opinion, but he has too much talent behind him to hold them off. So we mentioned this a little bit ago. Outside linebacker, because of those 2023 signees, specifically Andrew. But you do bring back Q Robinson, hell of a special teams player, been a situational player. Different defensive scheme coming in, though, with Kane Womack. Keanu Coote, I think, falls into that category as well as a program veteran. So what do you think about that, Andrew, as we get you going?
Yeah, I mean, Q, he's been in the program for the last couple of years. I think he's obviously understood the previous defense pretty well. But, this is a guy that, decided to stick around. He wants to, have an opportunity to play. I think he is going to have that opportunity. We've seen him be dynamic on special teams. I know that he had one special teams mistake a few years ago, but people tried to hang up on that. But he was great last season when he had his opportunities, especially on special teams. But then, later part of the year, we saw him getting in on the field a pretty good bit. And I think he's going to have certainly an opportunity to make an impact this year with this new staff.
Tim, you're a big Quay Roussel guy. I mean, we talk about him a lot here on the program to go along with Keon Keeley and Yanze Pierre from that 2023 cycle. But what about Q? Man, I love this guy. And I think Andrew's right. He has produced, He did add the fumble recovery on special teams against Michigan. That sort of made up for the miscue, the mishap more so than anything against Tennessee a couple years ago, because that was a brutal punt that would have hit a lot of guys. And then
Yeah.
he kind of lost his bearings a little bit, touches the ball. We get it. It was a tough one for him. But is there an opportunity still for these veterans at edge, or is it going to be more about the young guys?
I think there is, because he's like, he's a guy I'd consider like a stickum. You know what I mean? Find the ball, get the ball. He's a guy that you can put in there and send him straight at the quarterback. He's got that. He's built like a NFL running back. I mean, I think it's partly because of the number he's worn. But yeah, he's a straight line guy that can get in there. He's very physical, and he likes to hit you. So yeah, you got to roll for that guy where it's just as simple as on the snap, beat him and get there. And we saw him do that in the spring several times. We've seen him do it. I think he had a couple sacks this year, I feel like, that I remember. But yeah, I think he's a guy. I mean, the thing that you most successful teams on that front seven, on that attacking line, the way that Kane Womack seems to want to attack, you're going to have to rest guys and rotate them in. I think that's one of the good things that benefits Quay, Keon, Pierre. If it benefits them, I think it also benefits Q to get in there and chase a quarterback down.
I would ask about some vets in the secondary, but there aren't any, right? I mean, so
yeah, there's not. Yeah,
we don't really need to hit on that too much. But the defensive line, and it's a guy that, one of the guys anyway, that I think is going to go into spring in all likelihood, I would think, as a first team guy, is Tim Smith. And he's had opportunities. It's not that he hasn't played a lot of football. I guess this is more in relation, Andrew, to production stepping up to that level that we kind of all expected from Tim Smith to this point in his career. Maybe a Justin Aboigbe-like finish to his time in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing what he's going to be able to do this upcoming season, because he's had those moments where you're like, wow, he's is one of those unique players on the defensive line. The way that he can move, his size, his physicality, can he be consistent? Every single time he steps out onto the field. I think that's the biggest thing with Tim Smith, is just consistency and playing up to his level every single week. And because he's like I said, a unique player. He's got a lot of talent. He's just got to be more consistent. And if he can put it together this season, there's no doubt that he could potentially be a first, second round type player. But he's just got to be consistent.
What are you looking for out of Tim Smith, Tim, or maybe another veteran or two up front?
I'm looking. With Tim, you remember Jeff Blauser for the Braves?
Shortstop.
That dude, in every contract year, he hit 500, 40 home runs, and stole 60 bases. Every other year of that contract, Jeff was pretty average. So I think that contract year, and we've seen it a lot, because that's what it is for Tim Smith, right? This is a year, couldn't go this year where you wanted to. Got the NFL makeup. You know what I mean? Physically, you've got a lot of things that NFL teams are going to like. I think he's going to test fairly well, but you got to put that film on paper. This is a different style defensive line, maybe not as comfortable in the previous defensive scheme. So there's no excuses this year. I mean, that's a guy they're going to have to build around. I mean, you got Otis, you got Tim, you got guys coming back. We got the young guys with Renaud. I know you and I've talked about him a lot. Still heard great things about him last year. Think he factored in some other guys leaving that he was doing some well, and Edric Hill. So a couple of guys that were considered sleepers or diamonds in the rough are turning out to be actually pretty good, players, have that potential. So I expect a big year for Tim. I expect this to be the motivation year where you come in shape, and you come in with a purpose to say, hey, I was a highly recruited guy for a reason.
Yeah, the good news for Freddie Roach is that if we use the third year designation as vet qualifying for this, he's got a handful of guys. I mean, Damon Payne kind of fits into that mold. Tim Keenan, Jaheim Otis. They really have those type of guys across that defensive front moving into the 2024 season. So we've got the two together. We've got Andrew Bone, we've got Tim Watts together here on the program. So we would be absolutely remiss if we didn't at least hit on recruiting. And I know it's been pretty quiet in February after the late signing period. You did have some portal movement as it continued on following Jim Harbaugh moving on to the National Football League from Michigan. Alabama, beneficiary of that with Keon Sabb. But different feel, right, guys? Going into March, things start to percolate, things start to pick up. So, Andrew, what do we need to be sort of tuned into here first as we transition from February into March?
Well, the dead period ends. Dead period ends next week. We're going to start seeing recruits visit campus again, starting, I believe, on March the 4th. It's the first day that we're going to start seeing recruits on campus, and that will go into next weekend. I think March the 8th is the big day that we're going to see a lot of recruits on campus. Juju Lewis, public knowledge, 5-star quarterback committed to USC. He's going to be on campus next Friday. And there's a lot of other kids. You can go to Bama Online to see the complete list of players that will be on campus next week from the 4th through the 8th. So it's going to be a pretty busy week for the Crimson Tide with kids coming on campus. But we've also been seeing a lot of new offers. I think last week we saw 4 offers the later part of the week from Thursday and Friday. Kids are still being evaluated by the staff. It's really about getting these kids on campus, kids that haven't visited yet and haven't sat down with the new coaching staff, try to get these guys on campus and evaluate them, from a personal standpoint, from a mental standpoint, sit down with them in the film room, kind of pick their brain a little bit, see if these are guys that fit your program, and these are going to be guys that you're going to want to bring in for official visits down the road. And we're already starting to see a few players announce official visit dates. Not many, but a couple have already told us that they're going to be in town in the month of June. So we'll start seeing more official visits confirmed over the next couple of weeks, couple of months. It's really about to kick off, though. I mean, we always talk about how dead it is in the month of February, and that's just kind of been consistent for the last 17, 18 years. Just not a lot happening besides coaches evaluating players. But what we've seen with this new staff, we've started to see more offers extended, more conversations. Coach DeBoer has been really active, talking to a lot of kids on the phone. Probably more so than Coach Saban was at this point the last several years. But this staff's getting after it. I think they're doing. Tim mentioned this on the BOL roundtable yesterday that he's been really impressed with a lot of these evaluations because a lot of these kids aren't ranked. They might be West Coast kids that haven't gone out and gotten seen by evaluators and things like that, but staff's doing really good as far as evaluating kids, bringing guys on campus, and I think we're going to see that with the updated rankings here pretty soon.
Hey, Tim, give me, if there are any, some noticeable differences maybe already that you've detected between this staff and Nick Saban in his 17 years on the job. Understanding it's been pretty quiet by rules and NCAA bylaws anyway, but is there a thing or two that you've noticed that, hey, this is a little bit different?
Yeah, I think the first thing that jumps out for you is the offensive linemen they're recruiting. I mean, obviously, Jackson Lloyd, speaking like Andrew said, I love the evaluations. I love this. This is what I used to love with the Saban staff is, the Bama bump myth came from this. An unranked, not highly ranked player Alabama offered. So we looked into him, did research, passed it on, and the guy ended up moving up. It wasn't because he just offered by Bama. It's that Bama drew our attention to him because I work for an Alabama website. Andrew worked for an Alabama website. But Jackson Lloyd, this is a guy 280 pounds, around that, 6'6", out there from Caramel or Carmel by the Sea, whichever way you say it. But he's a guy I don't think the previous staff would have been high on because kind of similar to the Freeling kid that went to Georgia a few years ago, a little lighter. They liked him heavier. So I've noticed that. Another thing I love about this reminds me a lot of Alabama in the early years, the first decade, because, again, when they're offering kids, Sharma, the defensive lineman, he's another one, not highly ranked. Nobody really had paid attention to him. But go watch his film. He's 100% an absolute dancing bear. So these guys, you go in and look at what they're doing evaluation-wise, they're very confident. And, you kind of suspected that when you looked at Washington, not seeing a lot of top 10 classes at Washington, yet they're in the college football national championship game. They've got guys getting drafted. They got 3 wide receivers that are going to get drafted. They've got other positions being drafted. So they obviously used the portal, but they also knew about the recruiting evaluations. And look at Noah Carter. You know what I mean? This is a guy's a 3-star from Arizona. They had committed, turned out to be Arizona's Player of the Year. We like him as much at tight end as we do on we do on defense. So that's the one thing. I think they're very in depth, and of course they're going to be very active recruiting.
Yeah, Andrew, it sounds like the next month or so at least is going to be Juju Lewis watch. Is that sort of what we're picking up here? The quarterback commitment from SC, the former teammate of Caleb Odom, I guess, on the high school level.
I think the biggest thing for me as far as quarterback watch is who else is going to get extended an offer, because you have 3 known offers right now since the new staff arrived, and all 3 of those guys are committed elsewhere. You have George McIntyre, who committed to Tennessee. Of course, that offer got extended within a few days before he announced his commitment. I think the new Alabama staff knew that, and they threw that offer out there knowing that he was going to end up going to Tennessee. But you have 2 guys that they've been in heavy communication with over the course of the last month, and that's Deuce Knight out of Mississippi, who's committed to Notre Dame, and then Juju Lewis. Of course, you had the offensive coordinator change, but I don't think that played that big of a role. Somebody asked me the other day, if that really kind of ended things with Juju Lewis, and it didn't, because he quickly set up a visit, and he's going to be in Tuscaloosa next Friday to meet with Coach DeBoer, who he's already met with, and also Nick Sheridan, the new offensive coordinator. So, they're going to get Juju on campus. We know that. Are they going to be able to get Deuce Knight on campus, who came out recently and said that he is in contact with Coach DeBoer almost every other day? He's talking to the coaching staff very often, has high interest, lives in Mississippi, in Loosedale, which I made a trip to Loosedale, Mississippi once to go see Alonzo Lawrence, who was a top 100 defensive back from Mississippi, signed with Alabama, ended up I think he ended up at Alabama for maybe a semester before he ended up leaving.
It was quick. Yeah,
it was very short in that 2008 recruiting class. So my truck actually broke down in Loosedale when I went over.
Sounds like a country music song. You should write a song about that.
So that is a trip that I will always remember, because it's one time my truck broke down on a recruiting visit. So we'll have to see if I'll go back to Loosedale to see Deuce Knight. But those are the 2 guys right now that we've been following pretty closely. And Deuce has said that there's no visit plans right now, but we can see that changing. So who else do they decide to extend an offer to this spring, or do they decide to wait a little bit longer and until the spring evaluation or summer evaluations?
See, the problem for me not the problem, but the interesting thing for me, for the quarterbacks, are you look at Charles Powers' rankings. The top 10 are committed. 16 or 17 of the top 20 are already committed. That all those aren't going to hold, right? They're not all committing in the day and age of the NIL, basically a year before signing and hold up. So they're going to have to go in and pick their guys in battle. And I do think that's the top thing they want to do, is get their quarterback, right? That's the guy they want. They got Austin Mack, who's the only quarterback on campus they recruited. So they've got him. That's an advantage. But you also want to pile up the guys that you like. And that has nothing to do with God. They could have loved Jalen Milroe and Ty and Dylan the same way had they been here. But you want to go get your guys. I do like the Deuce Knight kid a lot as a fit. Maybe it's the left-handed deal. Yeah. You come from Penn. I think Travis says that before I say Phoenix every time. That's my boy. He's looking out for me. But
always.
Yeah, I agree that quarterback position is going to be interesting.
Anything else, guys, before we get out of here on a Monday morning? Did want to mention, man, Alabama baseball team, Alabama softball, both off to undefeated starts. Obviously, the competition is going to ramp up, but that's good to see from Rob Vaughn's first team. And, of course, love some Patrick Murphy on the softball side. Continues to do a great job. Otherwise, anything else, fellas?
No, I do think it's hilarious. The NCAA opens up the recruiting window the same week as spring practice.
Oh, jeez.
They hate college coaches. I am telling you, somebody at the NCAA, whoever sets this calendar, hates college. They didn't date them in high school. They couldn't be one. They didn't offer their son. For some reason, they hate them, because why do you go both at the exact same time? You can't really
No.
explain that, can you? And I do think, in all seriousness, a factor is they can come on campus and watch them practice, which is a huge, huge advantage. But again, Charlie Potter tweeted this morning, spring practice starts next week, which seems absurd. And then Andrew, we know that recruiting window's opening back up. So there wasn't a lot of wet rest for Kalen DeBoer, right? Just finishing off his staff recently. He seems to like it though. I mean, dude's like in his free time, seeking out radio shows to do.
Yeah,
So,
you better love it. You better love it. You got March Madness coming up. It's officially March in a couple of days, so we look forward to that. On the basketball front, and Andrew, we look forward to your continued insight and expert analysis for us there at Bama Online.
Yeah, we've got a lot of stuff coming out over this next week. A lot of breakdowns, a lot of interviews. So go check us out, Bama Online. We'll continue to have a lot of nuggets on the BOL roundtable as we do every single day. So go check us out at Bama Online.
Oh, and thank you too, Tim.
I do what I do. Yeah. This is like, you've heard of the Jordan rules. This is like the Watts rules. I'm just so good. It's like, y'all just pass around all this love. I just come in here, score 30, win championship.
That's right. I'm just trying to be Steve Kerr, and maybe if I need to knock one down from 3.
That dude got a 2-year, $35 million contract.
He deserved it after getting beat up by Jordan in Chicago. Jordan didn't have to do that.
Jordan should have finished the job, in my opinion. Come on, Mike. Do what you got to do.
It was a flu game. It was a flu practice.
I find Purse smug.
All right. Andrew, Tim, man, great stuff. And we look forward to more of it right there at Bama Online. So for Andrew Bone, Tim Watts, Jimmy Stein, Travis Schreier, thanking you for joining us right here on the YouTube home for BamaOnline.com. And until next time, so long, everybody.